Egalitarian Geordie here, and today I'm going to talk about the social justice ideology and its impact on entertainment media. Most people have heard about Marvel and their SJW comics and how poorly they've been performing, but I'm going to focus on television, in particular the TV show Doctor Who, in the 10th season since Doctor Who came back, has seen the Doctor's companion, the second most important character in the series, be a female black gay character, which in of itself there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, in the first two series of Doctor Who, we had already seen all three of those. Rose Tyler was female, Mickey Smith was black, and Captain Jack Harkness was bisexual. But in all three cases, these identities weren't the defining characteristics of the character. They had depth and story around them. Captain Jack was the hero. He was the brave man who would get in and do what needed to be done. He led the defence against the Daleks. He had some great little interactions with Mickey and the playoff of who was out for Rose's affections more. And ultimately, when he died in the final episode of the series, it had emotional impact. Admittedly, that was slightly less than when they brought him back, but even that, they then used the fact that they came back from the dead to drive some of the storyline in the Torchwood spin-off series. Then we had Mickey Smith. He was the comic relief. His time travelling with the Doctor was quite short, but he was in the series for 2 straight seasons as a recurring character. And from that, got to see the transformation from Rose's boyfriend to an independent hero standing on his own 2 feet. After the Cybermen 2-parter in Series 2, and Rose Tyler, the Doctor's companion for the first 2 series. Female companions are actually the norm for Doctor Who. Indeed, in the first ever episode back in 1963, of the 3 companions the Doctor had, 2 were females, his granddaughter and her schoolteacher. But again, the fact Rose was female wasn't what defined the character, it was her journey. From the wide-eyed teenager meeting the Doctor in strange circumstances, through adventuring with him through time and space, and ultimately sacrificing herself in a way to ensure the safety of the world. In all 3 cases, their identity weren't what defined them, the stories and adventures they went on, and the character development is what defined who they became. So, the 10th series of Doctor Who, we have a new character, Bill, as the Doctor's primary companion. As I said at the start, she's a black, female, gay character. And the only problem with that is they make it the primary focus of the character. It means you don't get to see the character grow and evolve in other ways as well as you would for a character where they just set the identity up and then just left it in the background until it became relevant to the story. And whereas with Captain Jack, where they made references to the fact he was gay, they were there, but they were few and far between. Because of the lack of growth in other areas for Bill, every episode was reinforcing the identity and spending time on that rather than other things. As I said before, I don't think these identities should be what defines the character. They need more, they need opportunity to grow and somewhere to take a story, not just be this identity or that identity. And when they finally got away from that in the final 2 episodes is when I found that I actually started liking the character more, and were the best episodes of the series. In the penultimate episode, Wild Enough in Time, we saw that Bill and the character that later turned out to be the Master developed a relationship between them. It was just a friendly relationship, and they allowed the characters to interact and build. Something that allowed storyline progression rather than just focusing on what someone was. Now, at the end of that episode, and then through most of the following episode, the Doctor Falls, they had a major change for Bill. They turned her into a Cyberman, one of the Doctor's oldest enemies and greatest threats. And it was at this point that the identities that up to now had defined the character were removed, and this really allowed for development and growth of the character to go through an experience which in the history of Doctor Who is shown to be a horrific experience, having everything that makes you an individual removed. And that allowed some real emotional development for this character. and then at the end of the episode we see Bill take the unconscious Doctor back to the TARDIS. While in the TARDIS, she meets the pilot that we saw in the first episode, and they leave together. Now you could have had a wonderful book-end story, having the pilot from the first episode returning in the end, and having that the focus of the lesbian part of the character without the need for reinforcing it through the rest of the series, and focus the rest of the series on developing the character and making someone that you care about much more, giving even more emotional impact to when she's changed from a human into a Cyberman. However, the way they've handled Bill's character this season, and in contrast to almost every companion for her, feels stunted. It feels like the normal growth, change and maturity that you would expect from a companion just hasn't been there right up until those last 2 episodes, where it feels like the identity politics narrative has been dropped and allowed for real character development. And for a normal person, the experience they've had in those first episodes would have changed them drastically by the time you got to those last 2, far more than actually happened. It didn't help me bond with the character and feel for them. She felt like token identities thrown in there, and for me that just didn't work. Now, another kind of social justice ideology that we've seen infecting in entertainment media, and particularly television and movies, is gender swapping characters. I can think of an extremely bad result of that we've seen lately, which is obviously Ghostbusters movie. It became a poor imitation of what the original Ghostbusters was, and they made the fact that they've swapped these characters to women too much of what was going on, rather than focusing on the story. And this is a problem I find with a lot of the SJW identitarian problems with entertainment these days. They focus on the identities rather than focusing on the storyline and the growth of the characters and what they're experiencing from these worlds around them. As I said, Ghostbusters is a very bad example of gender swapping. A great example of gender swapping was the early 2000s Battlestar Galactica series, where you had 2 characters from the original 1970s series in the characters Starbuck and Boomer, who were originally males, swapped into female roles, but they made the gender swap a natural part of the character and storyline. In Starbuck's case, she was a fighter pilot first and foremost, and she had a great engaging story arc. And the relationship with Captain Apollo, which was a really fundamental part of this 1970s series, was still there in the reimagining. And Boomer went from a black male in the original 1970s to an Asian female in the reimagining. And again, because they don't make that identity the key to the character, they let other things manage that character, and the great storyline they had of actually being one of the hidden Cylons was a perfect way to make something interesting in the lore about the character, rather than focusing on purely what you're seeing, and give you something more deeper to think about. So, to sum up, my general feelings about how SJW identitarianism has affected entertainment can be pretty much brought down to this. The problem with these situations is they don't think about the storyline, the character growth and development, the journey that that character needs to go through, and the character ends up being very static and very stale after a while. And it's only when they break away from the identitarian elements that you can really engage with the character. And if I could give the people making these comics, movies, TV shows, and what I would consider other art forms some advice, this would be it. Get back to the basics of what makes a compelling story. Don't worry about the identity of the character. Get to the core of what makes them interesting, the journey they're on, the tale you have to tell, the growth of that character. Make them someone that we care about, not an identity to be thrown at you. That's all for this video. Take care everyone, and speak again soon. Goodbye.